They all turned and looked at the big room they had been led to. It was fairly open and empty, almost like a theater room. At one end of the room, there were 6 square vats, each one nearly full with individual spectra. Above them was a peculiar-looking machine. From a central stack, 6 hoses broke off and led above each of the individual vats. At the top of the stack was a single opening, red with rust, despite the rest of the machine to be shiny and clean. Even further above that was a fairly complex-looking object, with chains and gears hanging off beams and pipes loosely. Running even higher than the whole machine was a length of scaffolding, with doors on either side leading out of the room. Down on the floor, a small collection of defeated, crying ponies sat, chatting quietly.
Those suits there, those are from that other flight school across town,
Aurora informed, sounding shocked.
And those other ponies, sitting over there, see? I remember a trip we went on once with the Levitating Acres private school. I remember them from that trip.
So, this is where all the failures go? Not deported, but forced to work forever?
Orion sobbed quietly. In exchanging for helping someone, he had doomed himself and his good friend to a life of servitude. Scootaloo reached a reassuring wing over and lifted his chin. She smiled at him, understanding his depression.
At least we don't have to go through it alone,
she cooed softly. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the group of ex-students. One pony from an unidentified school took off, heading towards one of the doors on the scaffolding. Immediately, 2 suited ponies launched at record speed, and both clipped the flyaway with their tasers. The pony spasmed in air, and then dropped like a stone, with an audible crack as he landed, and a violent burst of twitching. All the other ponies walked back, staring horrified at their friend. They watched, hopefully, for a long time. But he didn't move. Some cried softly. Most just turned away, far too confused to feel any more emotions.
I guess that option's out,
Aurora said to no one in particular.
But you can't fly right now anyways.
Orion questioned.
That medic guy, Patches or whatever he was called, he popped my wings back into their joints and bandaged up where my skin tore. I won't be winning any races, but I can fly again.
They slowly walked forwards and joined the group of ponies, looking at each other with understanding sorrow.
All right, eyes front and center, you inept mules.
One of the suited ponies shouted. After the previous display, no one challenged that order, and stared at the scaffolding, just as one of the doors opened. A few official-looking Pegasi walked in on the scaffolding and turned to look down on the group with disgust. One of them stepped onto a small podium set up in the center and began speaking loudly and clearly.
By now, you've all clearly determined that you are not going into exile. There is no deportation. There never was. You are in the factory. You will never leave the factory. And while you may be called useless, that's also not entirely true. You're worthless to the flock as a pony, but you still have purpose. Purpose to all ponies in this land, far and wide. You get to help us make rainbows. Beautiful, magical rainbows. Doesn't that excite you?
The mysterious announcer grinned ecstatically, taking in all the disgusted looks from every foal on the floor below him.
I thought so. It is just such an honor, you know. It leaves every pony entrusted with the task speechless, too. Now, do we have any volunteers?
Again, every pony below glared with hate. One brave pony, a light pink one from Levitating Acres, walked forward a few steps and then yelled,
"How could you ever get away with this? How could Celestia, or even Luna, know about this and tolerate it? It's slavery. It's torture."
I think you'll find it's more than that.
A second official-looking pony walked out of the shadows and up onto the podium. The pony was in a suit and masked. The first pony walked off the podium and allowed the second to talk. Scootaloo noticed that it was the rose-eyed pony from before. She watched, more intently now. The voice was familiar.
1,000 years ago, when Celestia banished Luna from Equestria and sent her to the moon, she was charged with 3 tasks. She originally was in charge of raising the sun and showering the land with rainbows. But with the moon being an additional task, she had to hand down the responsibility of rainbows. Celestia entrusted the Pegasi of Cloudsdale to make the rainbows for her, from there on. For the first dozen years, we were given powerful unicorns to help create spectra. Spectra is pure pigment, pure colour. Everything is full of spectra, but you can't just harvest it. You can never separate colour from an object. So it was made artificially with magic.
The masked pony never took her eyes off of the brave pink one.
That is, until our top engineers made a breakthrough. They discovered an ingenious way to extract pigment, and it was so beautiful, even a simple machine could do it. But it couldn't be done with just anything. The conditions had to be just right.
What did those horrible ponies do?
The pink Pegasus screamed, growing angrier by the minute. The mysterious pony whipped off her mask, unveiling more than her rose eyes. Her skin was a light cyan, and her mane was a gorgeous rainbow. Several of the fillies gasped. Scootaloo's knees weakened as it hit her. Rainbow Dash. Scootaloo's thoughts raced through her mind, and the room began to spin. It couldn't be. An evil twin, maybe? Perhaps some neglected sister. Rainbow Dash couldn't be this evil. She was her friend, her mentor, her only family, even if not by blood. How was all that she could think.
It had to be live ponies. Only in ponies where magic and spectra ran freely together.
Rainbow Dash threw her head back and laughed maniacally.
Only then could the spectra be separated. And it was such a beautiful idea, such a wonderfully horrible idea. It worked so well. We could create exponentially more rainbows of better quality with real spectra. And it finally gave us a way to prevent Cloudsdale from being tainted by all those horrible Pegasi, which couldn't fly.
Scootaloo couldn't take it, while all the other ponies were exclaiming their disgust and fear, running and screaming for where they came in, backing off as suited ponies surrounded them and herded them back into the center of the floor. Scootaloo couldn't take it anymore.
I thought you loved me!
She wailed, cutting Rainbow Dash's laughter short.
Huh?
She turned and noticed the amber-orange Pegasus.
I thought you loved me! How could you do this to me? I thought you cared for me. After all the help all my life, you treated me like a little sister. And I treated you like a big sister. You were my big sister to me. You were the only family I've ever had, and you knew it!
Tears were pouring down her face now, obscuring her vision again. Her throat hurt from the crying and the shouting, but she couldn't stop.
After everything, you're just going to let me die? I tried so hard for you.
She stared at the floor for a moment. Everyone was silent. Scootaloo looked up slowly, and while she couldn't see for the sadness in her eyes, she looked straight at Rainbow Dash. Straight into those rosy eyes, past them, and deep into Rainbow Dash herself.
I thought you loved me.
Rainbow Dash returned the look. Her eyes revealed no emotion, no love, no care. Only apathy. Slowly, however, they glared at Scootaloo. Pure, seething hate erupted from Rainbow Dash's mouth as she screamed in return.
I did love you. I tried so hard for you. I taught you everything I knew in hopes that you would pass your test. You had it in you, kid. I knew. I knew what they did here ever since I performed that sonic rainbow, and they approached me. They wanted to find more ways to make spectra. They thought that if I was capable of making rainbows, I could help them make its components. Well, I couldn't, but I learned a lot about this place. I'm the manager here now, you know. I worked my way up, in secret, pretending to be only simple weather control. How do you think I could afford that massive house over Ponyville? How'd you...
She trailed, shaking her head, remembering her anger suddenly.
I tried, alright? It was up to you to save yourself. You didn't just fail yourself. You didn't just fail Cloudsdale. You failed me. And that's the worst thing you could have done. You aren't just dead to Cloudsdale now. You're dead to me.
The room tilted as Scootaloo tried to comprehend what she was told. Her mind broke as she was totally unable to focus on anything. She stumbled slightly until Orion held open a wing, and she clung to it for stability. Rainbow Dash noticed this and yelled with even more fury.
You can't have happiness.
You ruined me, now I'll ruin you. Workers, the brown one there, him first.
No!
Scootaloo, Orion, and Aurora all jumped. Suited ponies cornered Orion, pushing the other two to the side. He tried to leap out of the way, to run, but one of the stallions spun around and kicked at him. The hoof connected with his shoulder, and Orion collapsed with a shout.
Get back!
More suits yelled at Aurora and Scootaloo as they dragged the whimpering Orion to the front of the room. The giant machine at the back started humming to life, and the assembly of chains lifted off the top and moved towards the floor. Everyone noticed now that they were shackles, and the suits clasped Orion into them. Braving a look up, he turned to Scootaloo.
Don't worry, Scoots. I love you. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Orion. I love you too.
With that, the chains pulled tight and lifted the brown Pegasus all the way up to the gears. The chains grew taut and stretched each of Orion's limbs straight up and down.
We find the machine works better if the ribs are broken.
Rainbow Dash explained apathetically as the chains spun around in opposite directions, twisting Orion. His screams almost covered the echoing pops and shattering noises. One or two jagged bones tore through his side, and his yells faded to a slow, quiet rattle of breath. The chains untwisted, and the shackles opened, dropping the shattered pony into the single opening. Scootaloo watched in horror, her brain overcome with what was happening, detached from all emotion. She noticed the top of the machine was not rusty. It was blood. Blood, just like what was being tossed up from the mangled remains of Orion, as the rest of his body was swallowed into the great machine, finishing with one lone hoof pointing straight up, and then nothing was left. As the hoses over the green and red vats of spectrum started spewing their brilliant colors, Scootaloo's vision started to fade, and the last thing that she noticed was Aurora's concerned, broken voice saying her name as Scootaloo flopped onto her side.